been 40 acres and a mule. I didn't take the 40 acres, I took the mule and started trafficking.
What you know about rap? They look at the paint and ask if he American or African. I didn't take the 40 acres, I took the mule and started trafficking.
Fire, man. Shout out to both these two guys. I got Reaper winning the third round. I gave him the battle 2-1. It really depends on how you call the first round, though. If you think Jay won the first, then you may feel like he won the first and the second. If you got Reaper winning the first, you may feel like Reaper won the first and the third. Reaper did kind of stumble a little bit in the third, but I didn't really take any points off for it because I felt like somebody said something in the crowd and kind of like talked through his round, and he had to tell them to be quiet. And I felt that kind of caused that little awkward moment real quick, but so I'm not gonna really blame him for that. Not enough to take away. I still felt like his third was super strong. So shout out to him, man. And you know, whether you win or lose, man, this ain't no knock on Jay Breeze. Jay Breeze definitely did his thing, whoever you got winning this battle, and he's just showing you that he is one of the better bricks for RBE. You know what I'm saying? He's definitely one of the better bricks. They got a few of them. They got him, they got Payne, they got Coach Corleone, they got Jay Jeans. I mean, the list goes on, man. My boy from New Orleans, you know, they got him. So I'm probably going to end up doing like a top 5 bricks or something as they battles start to drop. Some of y'all ain't seen.
Good morning, barbershop flow. Gotta have an early morning blunt for you start working in the morning, man. It's mandatory, man. Big skills in the building, man. My New York swag is in the building. We're all New York out.
On the battle, so as the battle start to drop, I'll probably do something like that. But so Jay versus Reaper, I got Reaper 2-1, man. Shout out to everybody. Subscribe to the channel and holler at your boy.
Number 8, Mark Dixie. In the mid-2000s, London teenager Sally Ann Bowman was in the early stage of a promising modeling career. Others in the industry had compared her to supermodel Kate Moss, and in January of 2005, she joined Pulse Model Management, subsequently becoming the face of Swatch Watches. On September the 24th of that year, she went out with a group of friends to Lloyd's Bar in Croydon. In the early hours of the following day, the 18-year-old called her ex-boyfriend to pick her up after her older sister had reportedly been arrested for fighting. Bowman and her ex had a heated argument inside the car, and at around 4 a.m., she got out near her Blenheim Crescent residence while the man drove off. Within minutes, Bowman was brutally stabbed in the neck and stomach. The teenager was then assaulted as she was either dead or dying before the killer made off with her cardigan, underwear, handbag, and cell phone. The ex-boyfriend was taken into custody as the primary suspect before he was eventually ruled out based on DNA evidence. In June of 2006, the police arrested Croydon man Mark Dixie, whom it later emerged was a registered offender. The 35-year-old had provided the authorities with a DNA sample after he'd been arrested following a pub brawl a few weeks earlier. The sample definitively tied him to Bowman. He only admitted to the assault, claiming he'd found her on the ground and didn't know she'd been stabbed. It only took a jury 3 hours to convict him on the charge of murder. On February the 22nd of 2008, he was sentenced to life with a mandatory 34 years, one of the longest minimum terms ever imposed upon a single murderer in the UK. Number 7, Russell Marsh. After months of being unhappy in her marriage, Jade Ward asked her husband Russell Marsh to leave their North Wales home in August of 2021. There had been periods of separation followed by reconciliation in their relationship in the past. Some of the rifts were reportedly fueled by Marsh's controlling and paranoid behavior, but 27-year-old Ward was reportedly determined to end the marriage for good and move on with her life. On August the 26th, as their 4 children slept, Marsh entered the Shotton home using a key he still had in his possession in what would later be described as a brutal and remarkably cruel murder. He disfigured Ward with a knife and then fatally strangled her. In the immediate aftermath, he drove the children to his parents' house in Colchester before surrendering to the police. They found the woman's body dumped under a pile of clothes in a room that had been sealed with a dressing gown cord. 29-year-old Marsh would maintain that her injuries and death had been the result of a sadomasochistic game gone wrong. He claimed that Ward had asked that he strangle her while they were having consensual relations, before later stating that she'd cut up her face and taunted him. His version of events was dismissed as falsehoods and slurs by the judge presiding over his case. Marsh was found guilty of murder and sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison. Number 6. Abby Watson. In February of 2018, Welsh woman Abby Watson and her boyfriend were at a pub in Newport, where a former was involved in a brutal altercation with another woman. Watson's boyfriend had lost his wallet, and the couple asked 26-year-old trainee beautician Demi Marshall if she'd seen it. The innocuous question enraged the woman, who started screaming at Watson. When the latter went to confront her, Marshall smashed a wine glass on the bar and, in a split second, forcefully pushed it into Watson's.
I love it. Got your bitch ass. I got you, nigga. See how you get fucked up. You about to get fucked up, nigga. About to tear this nigga ass up. Just get it, nigga.
9.4%.
Oh, fuck!
Minutes until fully charged.
Damn. Fucked up.
Battery 94%. 10 minutes until fully charged. Charging stop. Battery 94%. It is 8:30 a.m. Battery 94%. 10 minutes until fully charged.
Bitch niggas! Bitch niggas!
Face before dragging it across her cheek. The victim began bleeding profusely and passed out, causing her boyfriend to fear for her life. While she waited for an ambulance, others in the pub started wrapping coats around her, as due to the shock, she'd begun shaking uncontrollably. Watson received 2 blood transfusions and at least 65 stitches during an operation to mend her severe face wounds. She had also suffered an eye injury and a fractured cheekbone in the attack. The 22-year-old experienced extensive mental anguish during her recovery after being left with large scars on her face. The woman reportedly felt like her life is over, started taking antidepressants, suffered from nightmares, and took down the mirrors in her house so as to avoid reliving her ordeal. Marshall was subsequently found guilty of wounding with intent to inflict grievous bodily harm and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Number 5. Nicholas Foy. After consuming a life-threatening amount of alcohol and cocaine, an Englishman stabbed a French tourist to death in Eltham, southeast London, on August the 11th of 2017. Accomplished triathlete Laurent Volpe, aged 49, was on a 2-week holiday with his wife and 2 children. He stepped outside to get some food when Nicholas Foy, a man in his late 30s, started following him. Foy, who was only wearing a pair of pink shorts at the time, plunged a large kitchen knife into Volpe's stomach in a random and unprovoked attack. The blade punctured the Frenchman's liver. He was taken to King's College Hospital, where he passed away 3 days later, in spite of having received a liver transplant. In the immediate aftermath, Foy shouted at witnesses, "Do you want some?" before he was captured by CCTV, fleeing the scene of the stabbing. He was approached by law enforcement shortly thereafter and punched an officer before he was subdued with a taser. He was taken to a hospital.
Shit, this shit cost me. This shit cost me $42,000.
For self-inflicted injuries to his foot, which he'd gouged with the knife, believing there was a bomb inside. While at the medical facility, Foy headbutted another officer before he was sedated by staff. During the trial that followed, he blamed his behavior on the drugs and alcohol binge, but was ultimately ordered to serve a minimum of 17 years in prison. Number 4. Graham Williamson. In August of 2020, Scottish man Graham Kermit Williamson was gunned down in the garden of his property in Blantyre, South Lanarkshire, in what was deemed as retaliation for a humiliating video. A few days prior to the shooting on August the 14th, convicted drug dealer Hardman Felvis had been confronted by Williamson and his friends at the Shanghai Tea House in nearby Bothwell. He was filmed hiding under tables and calling the police. The clip was distributed on Instagram, and 25-year-old Felvis would later admit in court he'd felt embarrassed as it damaged his street reputation. A short while after the confrontation, Williamson's car was set on fire. Felvis teamed up with fellow reputed drug traffickers, Thomas Norris and James Bailey, both in their late 20s. The trio rented a flat in Edinburgh as a meeting point, traveled to Glasgow, where they purchased balaclavas, and then used a stolen car with fake plates to approach Williamson's Blantyre residence. On August the 17th, Doris allegedly acted as the triggerman. CCTV footage captured him approaching Williamson from behind and shooting him in the back with a sawed-off shotgun. He then got into the getaway car driven by Bailey, and upon reaching Edinburgh, the three men reportedly boasted about the killing. All of their actions were subsequently retraced by law enforcement. The three men were arrested, found guilty of murder, and sentenced to life in prison, with minimum sentences of 23 years for Felvis and Doris, as well as 21 years for Bailey. Number 3. Lewis Ashdown. 19-year-old Lewis Ashdown and Mark Williams, aged 18, met up online in late 2020 and developed a friendship that resulted in them spending time together in Uckfield, East Sussex, where they both lived. On May the 29th of 2021, Ashdown asked the other teenager to meet him in Fair Warpfield. Once they were both there, he encouraged him to drink copious amounts of soda that had been mixed with whiskey. Williams became intoxicated to the point that he could no longer move properly. About half an hour before midnight, he called his aunt to say that he was heading home. Ashdown was reportedly overheard in the background saying, "Don't worry, I'll make sure he gets home okay." In the minutes that followed, he knifed Williams in the back. Ashdown continued stabbing him throughout the body and head, ultimately inflicting 107 puncture wounds. He gouged Williams' eyes out, mutilated his groin region, and repeatedly kicked him in the head. He then dumped his mangled body in a stream, and Williams was subsequently reported missing. Ashdown behaved normally the following day when he went to the cinema and watched the horror film The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It, with friend Liam Hansen. Eventually he and the latter got drunk on Jack Daniels, and Ashdown confessed that he'd killed Williams because he'd been annoying him. He showed Hansen several horrific cell phone clips of what he'd done to the victim, maintaining that he'd deserved to die. Ashdown was subsequently arrested and, after pleading guilty to murder, sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 27 years served. Today's topic was requested by SKS 2002, Thomas McKim, and Perplexy Blue. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Derek Bird. On June the 2nd of 2010, over a 15-mile stretch of coastline in Cumbria, England, taxi driver Derek Bird carried out one of the deadliest mass shootings in UK history. There was a combination of factors that had led to the 52-year-old's mental breakdown and ensuing killing spree. A Thai woman whom he'd met on holiday to Pattaya had ended their relationship via text message after he'd sent her over $1,000. He bore a grudge against his Sellafield nuclear power plant, from which he'd been terminated amidst allegations of theft. He was investigated for tax evasion and also involved in a will dispute with his twin brother David, who would become Bird's first victim. The man traveled to his brother's home and shot him 11 times in the head and body with a .22 caliber rifle. He then killed the family solicitor, Kevin Commons, whom he'd also held responsible for the ongoing legal dispute. Bird gunned him down with a sawed-off shotgun and then a rifle at his Frizzington residence. He then shot at several fellow taxi drivers, killing one and severely injuring another and his passenger. Bird's spree continued through several neighboring towns and partially unfolded with him calling random people to his taxi and then firing at them, alternating between his shotgun and rifle. As he drove towards Seascale, he reduced his speed and shot at other motorists. In the afternoon near the village of Boot, Bird crashed his taxi into a stone wall, damaging one of its tires and then continuing on foot. At around 2 p.m., the authorities announced that they'd found his body in a woodland area where he'd taken his own life. Throughout his rampage, Bird had claimed the lives of 12 people and injured 11 others.